The grocery store on Wednesday mornings is mostly retirees and people who work nights. You know this because you're here every Wednesday at 9:15. Cart with the slightly wobbly left wheel, same route through the store every time. Produce first, then the middle aisles, then back around to dairy. There's a guy named Phil who stocks the cereal aisle on Wednesdays. You've never spoken more than 6 words to him, but you know his schedule better than most people know their coworkers. You grab the store brand oats, not because you have to, because you genuinely like them, and $2.89 is $2.89, and nobody has ever convinced you that the name on the container changes what oats taste like inside your body. Your phone buzzes in your jacket pocket. You don't check it until you're in the checkout line. A wire confirmation, $118,000, a commercial property in Raleigh just closed. The kind of building most people drive past without registering it exists. Low-rise, brick, corner unit. Occupied by a regional insurance company on a long lease, they'll renew because moving is expensive and inertia is powerful, and they've been there 9 years. You put your phone away. The cashier, a woman maybe 50, reading glasses pushed up into her hair, scans your oats. She asks if you found everything okay. You say yes. You mean it. It started not with ambition exactly, but with irritation. You were 29, working in municipal finance in a mid-sized city in the Carolinas, and the thing that kept you up at night wasn't excitement or vision. It was the specific nagging frustration of watching things be managed badly. Not dramatically badly, no, not fraudulently badly. Just the slow, grinding inefficiency of people who stopped paying attention. You'd drive past a small office building near your apartment on the way to work every day, and the parking lot lights were on at 11 in the morning, and the landscaping looked like someone had mowed it once in 2017 and given up, and there was a unit that had been listed for rent for 7 months. And you knew, you just knew, that whoever owned that building wasn't watching it. One afternoon, you pulled the county assessor records from your work computer during lunch. Looked up the ownership. An LLC registered to an address in Phoenix. You sat with that for 3 days. Then you made a call. Not to buy it, not yet. You didn't have the capital for that. You were 29 with a municipal salary and a car payment and $14,000 in savings. But you started reading. Every night, before anything else, 1 hour of reading. Tax assessments, cap rates, lease structures, depreciation schedules. The kind of reading that makes people at parties go slightly glassy when you bring it up. Which is fine, which is actually useful, because the things that bore people at parties tend to make money in ways that exciting things don't. The first deal was a duplex, $187,000. Conventional loan, everything by the book. You were terrified in the particular way of someone who has done enough research to know what can go wrong. First tenants were quiet, paid on time. You never actually met them, just emails through the property manager. Monthly cash flow after the mortgage and the manager fee and the vacancy reserve you kept out of discipline, $340. Same number as something else you've heard before, which almost made you laugh. But that $340 wasn't the point. The point was you understood the machine now. You'd built one, small, modest, real. The second deal came 14 months later. A small commercial strip, 1 retail unit, 2 office suites, a town in the Piedmont that wasn't glamorous but had a hospital nearby. And hospitals are employment anchors, and employment anchors mean tenants who stay. The seller was a man named Terrence, 66 years old, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. He wanted out, not because it was failing, because he was done and his son didn't want it, and his wife had been asking him for 4 years to just let it go. You paid a fair price? Not a predatory price, a fair one. You've always believed that matters, not just morally, though that too, but practically. Word travels in small markets. The person you buy from knows the person who's selling the next thing you want. Reputation is a balance sheet item most people forget to account for. By year 6, you had quietly accumulated enough that the municipal job had stopped making mathematical sense. You didn't quit dramatically. You finished your projects, transitioned your responsibilities, shook hands, brought donuts on your last Friday, which is such a specific detail and you don't know why you remember it so clearly, glazed 1 dozen from the place on 5th. Your manager said you were one of the good ones. You said you'd learned a lot. Both things were true. Nobody at that office knew what you'd been building. The admin assistant who sat near you for 4 years, wonderful woman named B, who kept a photo of her dog on her monitor and always knew when your birthday was, she thought you were leaving for a government consulting role. You said something vague and she said, "That's so exciting," and you smiled and meant it in a different direction than she did. The thing about real money is it doesn't feel the way television says it should feel. There's no moment, no arrival. There's just a Tuesday when you're filling out a form for a self-storage acquisition in Tennessee, and you realize you haven't checked your account balance in 3 weeks because you stopped needing to, and there's something almost disorienting about that. Like a sound you've been straining to hear for years suddenly not being there. You stand in your kitchen waiting for the coffee to finish, and the absence of financial anxiety is so unfamiliar that your brain keeps reaching for it. Keeps patting its pockets for the worry, finding nothing. That takes longer to adjust to than you expected. You drive a Subaru Forester with a cracked phone mount you keep meaning to replace. You've been meaning to replace it for 14 months. It doesn't bother you enough to actually do it, which tells you something about the relationship between wealth and urgency. When urgency is manufactured rather than real, half the things on your list stop seeming necessary. Your apartment, and yes, you own the building, and yes, your neighbors have no idea, is furnished the way someone furnishes a place when they care about comfort and don't care about performance. A good couch. A kitchen that functions. Books stacked in ways that would make an interior designer uncomfortable. There's a rug you bought at an estate sale for $180 that 3 separate people have complimented. You've never told any of them what you paid for it. There's a particular loneliness to knowing things you can't say. Not the loneliness of isolation. You have people, you have friends, you have a sister who calls every Sunday and talks for 45 minutes without pausing, and you love her deeply. But the loneliness of a version of yourself that lives in a separate room that you can't unlock for most people. Your friend Marco, good man, sharp and funny and loyal in the way of someone who has never been anything but loyal his whole life. He's been in the same sales job for 8 years, and he's good at it, and he's not getting ahead the way he should be. And you have sat across from him at dinner probably 40 times watching him try to solve a math problem with the wrong variables. You can't hand him the answer. You learned that. What you can do is ask him questions that lead him somewhere useful and hope the path sticks because he walked it himself. Last spring, he called you and said he'd finally started putting money into an index fund every month, just automatically didn't look at it. You said that's a good move. He said yeah, he'd read something about it. The something was a newsletter you had forwarded him 8 months earlier without comment. You let him own that discovery completely. You always will. You crossed $40 million in net assets on a Sunday in November. You were watching a football game. Your portfolio software sent an automated summary at 4:47 in the afternoon, and you glanced at it during halftime, and the number was just there, arranged in digits on a screen. You put the phone face down on the cushion. Your team was losing. You watched the second half. They lost. You made pasta. You went to sleep. The number didn't feel like anything more or less than what it was, which is a sequence of decisions across 11 years. Some smart, some lucky, most just patient, sitting and compounding while you did something else. Wednesday mornings, grocery store, wobbly cartwheel, Phil stocking cereal, store brand oats. Somewhere in Raleigh, a brick building on a corner is doing exactly what you need it to do. Somewhere in Tennessee, people are storing furniture and holiday decorations in the parts of their lives that don't fit in their homes anymore. Somewhere in the Carolinas, a parking lot is slowly, quietly, continuously making money while you decide between 2 yogurts and conclude it doesn't really matter and take the one you can reach without leaning over. That's the whole thing. That's all of it. Boring and ongoing and enough and yours. I want to be honest with you for a second because I think you deserve that at the end of a video like this. I wrote this because I kept seeing the same version of wealth in every feed, loud and curated and performing itself for a camera, and it started to feel like a lie we all agreed to tell each other. The quiet version. The one that looks like oats and cracked phone mounts and a thank you note still stuck to a fridge after 2 years. That one doesn't photograph well. It doesn't go viral. But I think it's more real, and I think some part of you already knows that. You've probably walked past something broken and fixable and walked away because it didn't look like the thing you were told to want. I'm not saying you missed your shot. I'm saying the shot is smaller and less exciting than advertised, and that turns out to be the whole advantage. If something in this hit different, sit with it. Don't rush it. Some things are worth being slow about.